All right, class, settle down, settle down. The Skate IQ guy is out sick today. My name is Mr. Brusco, and I will be your substitute teacher. He said to remind you that you have your kickflip exam coming up in 60 days. Yes?
How do we get ready for the test?
Good question, little tricky. Well, the Skate IQ guy outlined an 8-week practice plan. All I know is he said to watch this video. Welcome to Kickflip in 60 days. I want you to watch this video all the way through right now, and then your homework is to take it week by week. Week 1, we're focusing on foot position. A lot of different foot positions work for kickflips. But the thing is, you might not know which foot position works best for you. So what we're gonna do is get comfortable in a wide range of different kickflip foot positions to get started. Let's start with our back foot to make it very simple. We're just gonna put our back foot on the edge of the tail on the toe side without hanging your shoe off of the board too much. This is up to you. Obviously, there's a small range where this works, but as soon as you cross that threshold where you're hanging your back foot off the tail too much, your shoe's gonna be running into the ground, it's gonna steal your pop. If you're newer and struggling with your back foot position, like if you stop paying attention and your toes are hanging off, just make sure you really look where you're putting your back foot, because your brain and your foot are gonna be disconnected for a while you're getting that foot position. Your back foot's gonna stay there. Your front foot will have 3 different positions. The first one is gonna have your foot up just under the front bolts, with the arch of your foot a little bit more towards your heel against the rail of the board. So you're hanging your heel off, but it is more towards the center of your whole foot. The second foot position is just gonna drop our front foot down towards the center of the board. This is more like a standard kickflip foot position. The reason it's the standard is you kind of get the best of both worlds. You still have stability because your feet aren't too close together. You have room between your foot and the nose, so it's easier to pick up the board and get the right timing. There's really a lot of benefits to this center of the board standard foot position. That's where I think most of you will end up by the end of this 8 weeks. Then the third foot position is just getting those feet super tight, super close together. This is mostly so you can feel what it's like to have that really tight balance point and how your feet will have to adjust. This is the foot position you'll use if you want to flip the board faster. There are some cues that we can look for to know if you're getting into these foot positions properly. I can always tell you what to do, but I want to show you how to feel it so you have confidence that you're doing it the right way. So in this first foot position with our front foot high, all I want you to do is stand on your front foot so you end up turning towards your heel side. After you initiate that turn, put your back foot onto the tail and push it down so you can then turn the other way by putting your weight on your back foot. And then your weight goes back to your front foot and you start turning heel side again. As you shift your weight back and forth, a little bit more over the tail, a little bit more over your front foot, you should be swerving and kind of doing these really smooth snakes. My favorite part of this is it's gonna show you all of the different balance points that you're gonna be using while you're setting up for a kickflip. The big thing that I want you to look out for is right here. If you don't shift your weight over your back foot as you start leaning toe side, you're gonna have this issue where your board isn't turning backside and you start falling off, right? It's very simple why that happens. My front foot turns to the heel side, my back foot turns to the toe side. So if I have all my weight up here, I have nothing to turn the board that way. And you see this all the time when people are setting up for kickflips. I mean, it's probably happened to you. You get that little wobbliness, doesn't feel like stable, you don't feel in it. So that's all we're doing, is looking how to make those adjustments and how to pressurize the back foot properly. I want you to repeat this in all 3 foot positions. So you drop your front foot down to the center of the board. You'll notice it's probably a little bit more touchy on that heel side turn. And it's harder to shift your weight back and forth between your back foot and your front foot without accidentally lifting the nose or turning too much, everything starts to get more sensitive. But just know, as you turn up the sensitivity on your board, that also means it's loaded better. That means it'll flip faster, pop harder, spin more. I don't want you to look at it like instability. I want you to look at it like you're turning up the sensitivity of your controller to maximum. Then after that, we're gonna drop that front foot real low. Now some of that sensitivity goes away and it's harder to control the board in general, and it's harder to keep your balance right in that one spot. But once you find it, you'll really feel what it's like to keep your weight centered in one spot as you squat down and be able to make these small adjustments to be able to turn both ways. So there's a formula here. You have your feet super tight to work on balance, leg strength, ankle strength, quieting the board down. And we're gonna get used to getting our front foot in the center because this is the perfect middle ground. This is where most of us are gonna live while we're doing kick flips. You wanna get the hang of that middle ground sensitivity where you can go fast and flip it fast and turn. I think a lot of you will find comfort in that. So our goal here is to be making controlled turns. That means our balance feels really comfortable and we're not just flailing around on the board. I don't want you to put your foot all the way off and turn right and be like, man, I'm doing it so well. You see how sharp I'm turning. In reality, the goal is to be able to set up for a kickflip however we feel comfortable and be able to skate in a straight line perfectly balanced. And we get there by using the skills we learned in this first drill. This next skill is a little bit of a curveball. I'm gonna set up in that kickflip position we just learned and start doing some tic-tacs. This is gonna show you how the board reacts a little bit differently depending on your different kickflip foot positions. You're gonna notice as you put more weight on your back foot, obviously that turns you a little bit towards toe side. So the backside turn is gonna feel a little bit different than the front side turn because of the way your board is wanting to roll and react to the ground. Depending on your bushings, if you have softer bushings, you'll have more of an impact as you're making these turns. Please make some intuitive adjustments so you're not rolling your board over toe side when you try to turn the front side portion. So this is really a spot that we can dial in that fine-tuned foot position for your skate setup and your tendencies. At the end of the day, we should feel a little bit of the center of our back foot when we're turning front side and a little bit more on the toes when we're turning back side. As you're placing your front wheels back on the ground, be careful not to overload that front foot because that's just gonna lock you into a front side turn the whole time. So we're gonna have to use really nice balance, keeping our weight evenly distributed between our feet as you're softly picking up the nose to move it back and forth. After you get the basics down, I want you just to shuffle your front foot around and feel what it's like as you drop it really low, feel what it's like as you have it super high, and then start trying to pick up a lot of speed from your tic-tac because you'll be surprised just how light that board really gets as you drop your front foot down. A much different feeling like this than in your normal, regular tic-tac position that you might be used to. Our final skill from week 1 is hippie jumps from a kickflip foot position. What you're gonna focus on is really finding stability at the bottom of your squat while you're in a kickflip position. Most beginners and intermediate skaters will start to lose their balance. They'll start to break down as they squat and then try and jump. The biggest thing that I notice happens is that weight starts to shift either forward or backwards during different processes of the squat and the jump. The reason we're practicing this in a kickflip foot position is so you can get feedback. If I squat and I start turning towards my heel side, we can intuitively put together that means my weight is shifting more over my front foot than when I'm just focused on balancing. So we're gonna make sure that we squat in a way where our weight is evenly distributed so we can hold this in a straight line. Even turn a little bit to the left, turn a little bit to the right while we're holding that squat. I want you to start with that because jumping requires you to push into the board with a lot of force. And if my weight's over my front foot and then I jump, the board is gonna turn even more as you start putting that power in. So, our goal is to be able to do a small hippie jump in a kickflip foot position while going in a straight line. I want you to repeat this in each foot position, meaning our front foot very low. Really focus on your balance. Front foot higher and front foot in the middle. If you can freely move your front foot around and squat all the way down and jump, you're in a great position to start trying kickflips. Congratulations on making it to week 2. This week, we're gonna focus purely on balance. Most beginners don't focus enough on balance because they don't know what elite level balance feels like quite yet. To put it simply, we're not just standing on the board and bending down. We're loading the board in a way where we're able to feel the pressure and the torque in the board, where you can feel that right rail bending down, you can feel that left rail bending down, you can feel yourself loading over the back truck with the tail flexing a little bit, and it's almost like the board is just ready to snap. It's just ready to pop. So we're gonna shift the board around a little bit and find a way to balance where it feels like we're more in the trick while we're still on the ground. For our first skill, we're gonna work on shifting that board around you, underneath you. And this helps with kickflips because sometimes the issue we have with either our front foot path or the board is sliding backwards when you're popping, that can just be from your setup. And I don't mean your foot position or where you're leaning. I mean your setup, like where your board is sitting underneath you. We can push that board forward and lean over it like this. And that's a lot different than bending down, say up here. This is a skill that takes a while to develop because A, it can be a little tough to balance in that position at first. And B, it's hard to even notice that it exists. So you spent a lot of your time skating just standing on the board, not realizing your back foot is sitting way behind you. But this is one of the fundamental adjustments you can make that will have a huge impact on the way your board pops, the direction your board wants to go when it pops, and being able to balance over the board properly when you're landing. A lot of that comes just from your setup and just from loading that board properly. So, what I want you to do is set up your feet in that standard kickflip foot position with just a little bit of speed. We'll ride in a straight line, we'll get that little squat, and then I'm gonna try to push my back foot forward so it's almost sitting underneath my head. So I'm putting my back trucks right under my head. It's gonna load your back leg a lot more. You should feel a lot more pressure on that back leg. But you can make these adjustments to keep your weight pretty much evenly distributed between your feet. I don't care that you get it perfect or that you feel exactly that even distribution, but I want you to push it forward as far as you can and get comfortable skating like that. Because you're gonna use at least a little bit of that feeling every time you pop, pretty much from now on. There's one more thing that I wanna get across to you. And this is definitely a more specific, higher level feeling that you can look for. I wouldn't say, oh, try this, you're gonna find a perfectly balanced loading position like day one and know exactly what that feels like. But it is something that's nice to aim for. So as you're loaded into your kickflip, try to feel like you can stand on the center of both your feet and hold it in a straight line. The reason that we do that is because when you're bending down to jump, it will start to get in your way if you start bending down forward, like this. You see how my heels are in the air? Yeah, your heels will come up into the air a little bit when you're loading up your tricks, but I don't want that to happen from leaning and falling forward. I want you to feel like you have the center of your feet on the ground. Might help to push your hips back a little bit, like you're doing either a wall sit or a regular back squat if you've ever been to the gym. This will really be a lot more comfortable. You'll be able to do a lot more tricks long term if you can find that really nice balance at the bottom of your squat. Our next skill, we'll be doing manuals in a kickflip foot position. So this is important for a lot of reasons. The biggest reason is because we're gonna start learning how to push and pull on the board while that nose is up in the air a little bit. To do a manual in a kickflip foot position, it's a little bit different because I can't just step on my back foot or else we're gonna start turning towards our toe side and it's all a mess. So how do we still load that front foot into the heel side while we're doing a manual? So what we're gonna do is take that skill we just worked on, push that board a little bit forward, and as we pick up for the manual, I'm actually gonna push a little bit into the board with my front foot. Sort of like when you're skating on flat ground and turning to the right, but instead of loading that front foot with weight, I'm just gonna push into that side of the board to help keep it flat. Once you find this, your life is gonna change because you're able to hold that loading phase through the beginning of your pop, right? When you're starting to pop, you can put pressure up against the board. And you can really have those opposing forces that make everything fly into the air really nicely. Don't worry about that too much right now. We're covering pop later. Just wanted to give you a little bit of heads up. Hey, this is worth practicing. And once you can manual in a kickflip foot position and able to hold the board flat without just going like completely to the toe side, you'll really be setting yourself up to do a lot of tricks down the road. If you need help with manuals, check out our video called The Most Important Trick in Skateboarding. Welcome to week 3. We're gonna focus on popping. Mitchie, how do I do kickflips? How do I flip the board? Help with my flick. Everyone wants to master their flick, but to do that, we first have to focus on the pop. The pop is what brings the board up into the air fast. The faster we can bring the board into the air, the faster we can flip it, and the easier we can flick it. So we always have to start here if we want to improve our kickflips. Let's learn to pop in a way that facilitates kickflips. There's one skill that we're gonna work on. It is setting up in a standard foot position, standard kickflip foot position. And we're gonna do a hippie jump. We're gonna lift the nose up a little bit. As you lift the nose, I want you to bring your front foot straight up and a little bit back. Your knee goes forward, your foot goes back. That just comes from rotating your hip. I don't want you to worry about rolling your ankle too much. That will happen pretty naturally because it's coming back here. And that's the way our body works. If you move your foot back, it's really like pretty much a connected motion where that foot wants to go too. And then especially as you get the opposing force of the nose, that will also make your foot roll. So you don't really have to roll your ankle with all your might. It's a little bit of rotating your hip so your foot sits a little bit back, and then maybe just pushing down on your toe just a little bit to give it some space. If we do those two motions together, we're setting ourselves up really nice to be able to get the flick with accuracy, timing, and a lot of power down the road. This one is very simple, but it's quite difficult. So make sure you take your time and you practice all the fundamentals leading up to it. And you'll notice as you get your front foot moving the right direction, it's gonna be a lot easier to hit the tail into the ground, and that board might even naturally start following you up into the air. If I leave my front foot out here, it's pretty easy to get this hippie jump, lift the nose, without the board bouncing into the air. But if I do that same thing, and I just move my foot a little bit the direction that it's supposed to go, it's genuinely a little bit tough not to turn it into an ollie, just because that's how the ollie works. I find that the hardest motions to learn are the initiating motions, because that's where our neural pathways are the strongest. If you're used to trying kickflips or ollies where you're jamming your foot into the nose, that's gonna be hard to change simply because you have to let go of the fact that that's how kickflips work. You're gonna have to really believe in your brain that that might not be the thing that's helping you do a kickflip. So when you say, I'm gonna try a kickflip, your brain goes, okay, this is what it means to try. And that neural pathway is so strong that you start jamming your foot into the nose before you're even up in the air. I'll go frame by frame because I do a lot of online coaching in our online group where I do video reviews. And I'll go frame by frame on a lot of the kickflip submissions. And I'll see before that tail even hits the ground or before the tail is off the ground, a lot of frames look like this where that foot is all the way into the nose. We have to give the board space to come up into the air, and then we start flipping. And we do that by getting our front foot up and out of the way a little bit. And we're just gonna practice that with hippie jumps where we lift the nose. As we move on, we're gonna cover the rest of that front foot path and how it works with kickflips, but this is single-handedly the best thing that you can practice. Hey, focus up. This is really important. So if you don't understand it yet, make sure you go back and keep working on it before you move on. You made it to week 4. And what's the most important thing in skateboarding? Timing. We have to focus on our timing just as much as we do our power, accuracy, how smooth we are, and our balance. Timing is in there as a fundamental piece that we have to dial in. And it seems like nobody, at least as I was growing up, it seems like nobody explained to me how to have better timing with your flicks. The best advice that I got, and I'm not saying it's great advice, I'm just saying it's the best advice that I got, was wait to flip it, wait to flip it, wait to flip it. The reason I don't like that is because waiting to me looks different than waiting to you. We have different habits and balance points and front foot placements. And so what, do I just jump and lift my knees up and then wait? I never understood that passive instruction. So what I want to do is give you something to do after your pop and before your flick that naturally gives you good timing. The first skill we're gonna learn to get good timing is to get a big wind up with our foot at the top of the ollie. So that means we're gonna lift our knee up, straight up, and we're gonna roll that foot way back, and then we're gonna slowly push that front foot into the nose. And we're gonna let your foot just swing underneath your knee like it's a pendulum. We're not gonna push down through the board. We're just gonna get it up, back, and then let that foot swing like it's a pendulum. It's a beautiful feeling. It's really soft because you're not jamming your entire leg through the board. You're just giving it some space and then letting it go through. The reason we want to make this soft is A, slow you down a bit. Learning a new skill requires slow motion moving because those neural pathways aren't that strong yet. So you're using a different part of your brain to learn something than you use to actually do it. The part of your brain that thinks and learns a movement is really slow at processing things. So you have to move your body slow so that part of your brain that learns motions can keep up. Once you do that motion enough times where you don't have to think about it as much, your brain lets it be processed through a different section that doesn't require thought, and then everything can go faster because it's automatic. So when you're learning that new motion, make sure you focus on thinking, being slow, and being smooth, and then you do that enough times where you can turn off your thinking brain, and then everything happens in the blink of an eye, and then you tell your friends that just go faster, it happens naturally. I don't know. Skateboarding's not that hard. All right, so you know what to do. What are the cues? How do you know you're doing it right? You're gonna go practice this on your own. I won't be able to hang out at the skate park with you unless you come to SoCal in January or February, and you can book as much coaching as you would like at the TF. I want you to feel like you're able to wind up your front foot. And then I want you to feel your nose while your front foot is behind your knee, okay? Naturally, I keep grabbing my foot because this is the amount of pressure that I'm trying to feel up against the nose. I'm pulling on my foot and I let it go, and it swings out. Visually, you should be able to see your front foot on your nose, pretty much directly under your head. Once you feel the nose, I want you to listen for a scraping sound at the top and just flip it halfway. That felt really nice. You notice it really lends itself to a lot of good habits. You jump high. You feel the nose later. So essentially, that is the same skill as waiting. Then, since you wound up, you can flick it soft or you can flip it harder. Again, I would focus on those soft flicks because as you try to flick it harder, you might end up in the other side of your brain and lose all those habits you're trying to build. The next skill we're gonna work on to get perfect timing on our kickflips is just a hand flip. That was a good one. So what the hand flip is gonna do is just make this flip a little bit more intuitive. Because if you put your hand too far out here, you're just gonna miss it. So it really shows you where this nose is gonna go. And since we're just better at controlling our hands than our feet, I mean, pretty much everyone on earth, our hands are just closer to our brains. We use them all the time. So we have this little bit of touch where we can catch the board and then feel it move and then let it go. Where our feet, sometimes it's a little bit like a caveman with a club and you're just like kicking at the board, you can't feel what's going on. We can use our hand to get a really good idea how late we can make this flick and where that flick is really gonna be. So really find that spot with your hand and then copy that with your front foot. Look, it's grip tape, so you're gonna feel it on your fingers, but it shouldn't hurt. Like if you're slamming your board into your fingers where they're like tingling and vibrating, or you're bleeding from flicking your hand through the grip tape, like slow down, soften up. Catch that board nice and soft. Just roll it over a mount that feels comfortable. We're just looking for the timing. We're not trying to do world record flip tricks with your fingertips. So for week 5, we're gonna focus on height. Everybody wants to flip their board faster, but I think there's a lot of benefits just being able to ollie higher. If you ollie higher, you'll have more time in the air, which means you can flip the board slower, which makes it easier to watch and read as the board flips. Also gives you more time in the air, so you can take your time to find the nose with your front foot and really develop your accuracy. It also gives you more power in the flick because you're bringing the board up faster, giving you better opposing forces. So I think working on your height is super important. We have a couple skills for you today. The first thing I want you to mess with, instead of just jumping higher to ollie higher, let's try ollies in 3 different foot positions and talk about the ways that affects the height. So if I do an ollie with my front foot on the front bolts, this is essentially gonna be the lowest ollie. Then if I use the same amount of power, but drop my front foot down to the center of the board, that's gonna be that medium ollie. At the end of the day, we're gonna use that standard foot position, middle of the board spot, most things, even when we ollie high. But if you really wanna push your ollies to the moon, you can drop your front foot a little bit further and work on them from there. Right now, we're just working on the balance and the pop and the timing and this stuff. We're not actually adding power yet. The reason that moving your front foot around changes the height is because it gives our nose more space to come up into the air. So if I lift my front foot up this much, then I am already running into the nose, right? So that's gonna keep the nose that height. If my front foot is back here and I lift it up this much, I am well off of the board, which means that board can roll up even further. So as I lift my foot and pick up the tail, I just set the height of the ollie a little bit higher. Get an understanding for that. Get an understanding of how to find the nose from each foot position, because it's a little bit different. The timing's gonna be a little bit different. That nose is rocking up to a different spot. You might have to work harder to flatten it out if your foot is lower rather than higher. So play with this. Don't worry about ollieing too high, but just find all the foot positions you can do an ollie from and make them all feel comfortable. Okay, as your front foot gets lower, it's normal to feel more weight on your back foot and a little bit less balance. So your timing from your squat to extend up through your jump has got to be really good when your feet are close together. When your feet are far apart, you're gonna have to be careful not to just like jam your foot into the nose right away and accidentally be doing ollie norths. You're just gonna have to focus a little bit more on that straight up action, get your foot out of the way a little bit, feel your tail bounce, and then we'll go from there. So now I wanna focus on adding height by jumping. What you're gonna do is take your most comfortable foot position that you can do ollies, and we're gonna jump at maximum power. And I'm gonna focus on mistakes that I want you to avoid, because we covered a lot of the good things about ollies and foot positions for kickflips and all this stuff. So I'm gonna focus on the things you're likely to mess up as you start going full tilt on power. The first one involves stability at the bottom of your squat as you're transitioning to go up. A lot of people go down, sit back, and then explode up like this. When they're trying to add just that little bit of extra power, they start getting shaky at the bottom. I really don't like that. I feel like whatever power you lose from keeping a stable base just isn't worth it at this stage. As you're trying to really max it out and break like the world record ollie, yeah, you can get loosey-goosey with it and find that power however you can. But in general, we have more than enough power in our regular jump to do great ollies. Most people can do a box jump to their shin height. So when you're talking about ollieing that high, it's not like a wicked high jump. It's just keeping balance and applying that power the right way. So make sure you stay balanced. If you wonder if you can keep your balance, all you gotta do is set up in a kickflip foot position and hold a squat and do a hippie jump. And basically, if you can keep the board flat and straight, you're in good shape. Ding, 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 ding. All right, new skill alert. This is a brand new concept that comes from jumping higher. Once you're in the air, legitimately, you're way up there, you're gonna have to start working with your board to get that tail up, okay? This is the hardest skill for new skaters to learn. I've seen really powerful skaters being able to jump high, and they can do everything pretty comfortably. They just can't get their tail into the air. One of the ways I like to think about it whenever I'm struggling getting my tail into the air, I think about my nose coming up and across, and then I think about the back trucks going backwards and up. In practice, it doesn't really look like that. But in my head, that visual of drawing this half circle up and back here really helps me understand what's going on with the board. It's probably moving a little bit more forward as it happens, but still, that picture is like I get up here, hook my front foot to the nose, and then it swings up like a pendulum. As it's swinging up, I can push the board through or do whatever I want. I want you to focus on being patient and lifting your back leg up really high. If you struggle lifting your back leg up high, you might just have to get stronger, okay? You need this motion where that back leg is slamming up against your shoulder, where your knee is slamming up against your shoulder, and you can hold it up in the air while you're in the air, okay? The biggest problem that I see skaters have when it comes to getting their ollies properly high is just a dead back leg. After they jump, everything stays stretched out. It's really hard for them to pick it up, but it's just such an important skill. You get your nose into the air, you get your front foot up against the nose, you know how to wind up, you know how to hook their foot there. You can lift your back foot into the air. Now what? Right, because we're in this position now. What I want you to do is adjust the angle that you're pushing your front foot into the nose. If you're pushing your front foot down at all, you're just gonna push your board down to the ground, right? It's never gonna come back up. So what you can do is, as you feel the nose, you can lift your front foot up through the nose, kind of tap on it up this way, sort of like a brush stroke, like you're just sliding your foot a little bit up and off the nose, trying to help that tail into the air. Your board is already rising, right? So you're not grabbing the grip tape and picking it up. That board is coming up into your foot and you're just getting it slowly to come up. So this is where it takes a lot of patience, because you already lifted your back leg. So there might be a lot of space between your back truck and your foot, but you're just nudging on that nose and waiting for that back truck to come up and hit your foot. Welcome to week 6, controlling the flip. Everybody wants to work on their kick flips, but nobody wants to change the direction that they're flipping the board. It really is surprising how often I've run into the conversation where someone is struggling with kick flips and they don't want to change the direction that they're kicking their foot. Once you get your timing and your pop and your accuracy is all right, basically the only thing left is the direction. And yes, I understand that it's a difficult thing to change, but it's definitely possible, and I'm gonna walk you through a few steps of how you can change your flick direction in a way that'll stick. Let's start by covering a few guidelines. When you flip the board, if your foot ever ends up below the board, you're in bad shape, okay? When I'm on the computer doing online coaching, there's one line that I can reliably draw on kick flips. And it's once the foot is making contact with the nose or the board, it doesn't matter where, I will draw a flat line through that. If that flick goes below that line, the front foot is never getting back on the board. I have not seen it once. If I draw that line and that flick goes above the line, at least you have a chance to step back on the board. Okay, so keeping your foot high while you're doing the flick is mostly determined by where your knee is. I know it's a little bit counterintuitive, but I can explain this. If you're picking up your knee as you're kicking, your foot will stay up. If you are pushing your knee towards the ground as you're flipping, your foot will go down. I think the hard part for most people is as they try to flip up into the sky, they start leaning back. So you gotta stay forward over it, just like our strong loading position, and then flick as you lift your knee up. So that's a really tight position. It takes some flexibility in your hips. It takes some strength in your hips, and it takes a very specific movement and a specific kind of power. But with time, patience, practice, you can definitely do it. So we'll get the board into the air, and we'll just slide that front foot through the nose and keep picking up our knee as the foot pendulums through. You can see that second motion where that foot comes up into the air. It's a really nice feeling because it gives you so much space from the board. It's so much different than that feeling where everything ends up below the board. And trust me, it's a lot harder to pick up your foot after it's moving towards the ground rather than just making it one motion combined with the flip. There's a handful of ways to flip the board. I always focus on flipping off the nose because generally I find that the most consistent. I skate a lot of transitions. For me, that's a really useful way to get consistent, easy flicks on transition and on flat ground. But there are ways to flip it off of the rail as well. Just for definition, the nose would be this area up here in this corner. The rail would be basically anything below the nose off of the side. Most newbies try to flip it off of the rail because that makes the most sense. Like intuitively, that's how you'd think about kickflips. The problem I find with flipping it off the rail is you don't get as much feedback from the board and it makes it harder to flatten out. So yes, you can flip it faster, but overall, there's less control, less maneuverability, and a little bit less feel in the rail. But for younger guys, for the smaller skaters, flipping it off the rail is gonna be your best friend. So you can just set up with your front foot pretty low and just slam your front foot right through the rail, and that thing will whip around. If you're a little bit bigger, you can jump higher. I personally think it's worth working out how to use the nose really consistently and learn how to pick up the tail as you're letting it go. So let's talk about rocket flips and getting the tail a little bit higher. So a rocket basically means that nose stays high the whole time. That might happen when you're flipping it low off of the board. That might happen if you're flicking up into the sky too much. In general, let's just try to keep them less than, say, like 45 degrees, right? If you're learning kickflips and they're sitting about 45 degrees while they're flipping, I don't care, that's just fine. You can land on it and roll away and get your reps up. That is awesome. You should definitely be stoked on that. If they're flipping more vertically than that, this just starts getting in the way of landing it, and it actually might start getting in the way of your technique as you get a little bit more comfortable. Your habits might be built in an improper way. So we'll just keep the board in that range. From 45 degrees to flat is a really good area to aim for as it's flipping. Getting your tail up into the air as you're flipping it is a really useful skill as you start doing kickflips up off of banks or downstairs, or you want a little bit crispier of a catch, you're gonna need that tail rising into the air. To practice that, what I would do is treat it just like we were treating the ollie and wait for your tail to start coming up into the air and then flip it. This way, you can get a sense of how your tail is moving into the air and then flip it from there. Just focus on a little extra pressure on your front foot, up against the nose, and let that thing flip over. Don't be too hard on yourself on the angle that your tail is coming up, because at the end of the day, when you're really trying it and your back foot is there to catch it, the only thing you need is that tail coming up. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Mr. Brusco, can I go to the bathroom?
Yeah, sure, but make it quick. This next part's about landings. You're gonna need that to pass the exam. Now we're on week 7, so focus up. We're gonna cover landings. Landings are not a passive skill. Landings don't just happen to you. You're not gonna flip a kickflip good enough and accidentally land it. Landings are an active skill. It takes belief, effort, confidence. You have to fight for it all the way through and all the way out of your trick. You have to read and react to how the board is flipping and be able to land in a couple of different positions and keep that fight alive. A lot of times when you're watching a great skateboarder who's really consistent, their ability to fight for their landings is just top notch, right? If you do a 180 and you are off of the side of the board and a little bit behind, and you're not just giving up and falling to the ground, you're already ahead of 99% of skaters. When you see someone land on the board and then fall, like for instance, a big slip out, they either weren't expecting to land on it or they got scared while they were doing it and just gave up and were just watching to see, oh, did this work? I wonder. No, it's an active skill that takes practice and commitment. So let's put you in a good position to have active landings. First thing's your eyes, okay? Keep your eyes on the bolts. Too often, skaters are looking out at nothing, trying to flip the board and just hope for the best. Watch the board flip intently, stare at the 4 bolts on the front of the board, and float your front foot over those bolts constantly. Track the front bolts with your front foot wherever it goes. As long as you have your foot on the bolts, you're able to center your weight over that and save any trick you would like. Whether it's transition, flat ground, whether the board's flipping, whether you're flipping, you can land over that front foot and sort of have your back foot anywhere. Okay, you see I can constantly be saving this no matter where my back foot goes. So while you're doing a kickflip, that should be 100% of your focus. You're watching the board flip and you're floating your front foot over those bolts. That is honestly most of it. That's most of skateboarding. Centering yourself over the front bolts while you're in the air and just tracking the board. If this hand is my board and this hand is my foot, I'm just playing whack-a-mole with the front bolts all the time. It is the way. Rarely your landings are gonna be perfect. Rarely. Oftentimes your board's gonna be sideways and you're gonna have to be turning out of it. Your foot position is gonna be borderline terrible. You're gonna have to be doing turns, quick foot position adjustments, lift the nose, maybe do a tic-tac out of it. We need this to be a fun and intuitive part of skateboarding. So if you land imperfectly, I want you to dance with it. I'm doing my kickflip over this crack, but this trick extends from when I start loading it, I'm in the trick already. The pop, the flick, the landing, and then skating out of it. So yeah, the kickflip's happening over there, but the trick spans 15 feet from start to finish. So that's what I mean by dance with it. It's just like anything else. You can't give up halfway through. Right when your wheels touch the ground, the trick isn't really even halfway done yet. Dance with it, fight for it, have fun, get mobile, stay loose, learn how to make adjustments on flat ground, in and out of the trick, so you're ready when it comes to saving it. Your brain can just turn on And you can make all those little adjustments that you see everyone make. Welcome to week 8, the final touches. Let's make some last minute adjustments that make kickflips a reality. We touched on this a little bit in one of the other weeks, but I want to talk about the difference between making an adjustment and going for a kickflip. So we have 2 different boxes that we can put our tricks in. We have the box where we're working on the mechanics and we're trying to make small changes, maybe 1 change at a time that is really specific, but that we believe will have a long-term impact that is worth dedicating time to make that skill better. And then the other box, we have brainless commitment, where basically this is a 3-step program that you just run on loop as you're trying your tricks. Over here, this box says, okay, I'm missing my flick. Let's say I'm flicking air. How am I gonna make that change? When I flick air, sometimes I like to push the tail out a little bit towards front shove, right? That brings the board up to my front foot a little bit better and I can kick through it. So right now I'm on this side of the box. I'm on this box where I'm saying, okay, my back foot is gonna move a little bit forward, so I'm gonna feel my front foot against the board. I don't care if I make this kickflip. I wanna know if A, I can do that motion, B, it works, and C, it's a feeling that I like and I wanna continue with. Back foot goes forward. All right, I didn't flick air, that felt great, okay? And now I know that's something I wanna keep. So now we can move on to step 2, say, all right, does it feel automatic? What happens, what are my instincts saying? Is that hard for me to get that feeling? Maybe I try 10, 20, 50, 200 of them to get that motion in. And now I'm saying, you know what? I think we got it. Seems pretty natural now. I'm gonna go back to the left box and say, now I'm gonna turn my brain off and I'm just gonna try a kickflip, which to me means a 3-step program that we can run. I usually just pick 3 key thoughts and I run them on loop. So for this, we're just gonna make them up, but I'm gonna say balance, then I'm gonna say soft, and then I'm gonna say float. Those are the words that work in my head. Balance, soft, float. Balance, soft, float. That means I'm balancing through the setup. I'm soft in the air, so my timing is better. I'm floating, so I can wait. Balance, soft, float. I'm not worried about where the tail is. I'm not worried about the fear of falling or slipping out or any of these. If I didn't like my kickflip, I could always go back into the right box and say, you know what, that flick angle just isn't for me. Hurts my hip, feels inconsistent. Let's change that. So now I can just focus on, okay, what happens if I try to flick higher? Wow, I really liked that feeling. It's not natural yet. Let me do it 100 times, 200 times. Then we get back into the left box. We pick that 3-stage program that we want to run. Now I could say balance. I still like soft for me. Balance, soft, lift. Instead of float, I could just say lift. 'Cause to me, that really drills that in. Balance, soft, lift. I like the first one more, but this is just an example of how that process works, how you can really separate your attempts from your structured practice. Different parts of your brain run depending on your goals. When you're trying to make tricks and handle your fear, it's really nice to have a mantra, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Just play that on loop and don't worry about anything else. While you're working on something, don't try to land the trick because then your brain will be too distracted trying to get to the goal, chasing the carrot, rather than just drilling in the right movement.
And now, graduating at the top of his class, Little Tricky.